You're looking for a speaker that actually lives up to the hype, something that will fill a room with immersive sound, sit quietly on a bookshelf or tower stand, and won't make you wonder if you just dropped $100 on a glorified paperweight. That uneasy feeling you get when you stare at a wall of specs and wonder if any of it matters in the real world? That's the exact place most of us end up before we click Add to Cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent the last few weeks setting up a pair of definitive technology Dymension DM60 towers in a modest 1,215-foot living room, swapping them in and out of a few different configurations, and listening to everything from dialogue-heavy drama to bass-pumped EDM. What I learned is less about the headline numbers and more about how the speaker behaves when you actually press play, move the furniture around, and try to live with it day after day. First off, the DM60 isn't trying to be a budget speaker. The price tag lands it in the mid-range to high-end territory, and that tells you the company expects you to care about more than just volume. The key selling point here is the adjustable bipolar array and the built-in passive radiators. In practice, that means the drivers are angled to bounce sound off both the front and rear walls, creating a broader soundstage without needing a separate subwoofer. In my living room, the effect is subtle but noticeable. Movie scenes feel a little more three-dimensional, and the music doesn't feel glued to the front wall. If you've ever sat in a room where the bass seemed to disappear when you moved a couch, you'll appreciate that the DM60 tries to keep low-end energy consistent across the space. The practical upside is obvious for anyone who wants an all-in-one tower that can handle movies, games, and music without an extra box. The built-in passive radiators give you a respectable thump for a tower. You'll feel the impact of a kick drum or an explosion, but you won't get the gut-splitting rattling you'd expect from a separate sub. For a typical home theater setup where you're pairing the towers with a soundbar or a small AV receiver, they fill the low-frequency gap nicely, and you can avoid the extra wiring and floor space a subwoofer would demand. That said, the design isn't without trade-offs. The bipolar array works best when there's reflective surface behind the speaker, think a wall or a solid bookshelf. In my apartment, the speakers sit against a plaster wall, and the rear-firing drivers bounce sound off that surface, enhancing the sense of depth. If you're planning to place them in a corner or against a heavily upholstered backdrop, you'll notice a dip in the bass response and a slight muddiness in the mid-range. So the DM60 really rewards a thoughtful placement, and that can be a stumbling block for renters or anyone with a cluttered layout. Another real-world consideration is the size. The tower stands are about 40 inches tall, which looks great in a dedicated media room but can dominate a smaller living room or a bedroom. I found the visual impact to be a plus when the speakers become a focal point, but if you're aiming for a minimalist aesthetic, you might feel they're a bit overbearing. The black finish is sleek, yet it shows fingerprints and dust more readily than a matte white or a fabric-covered grille. A quick microfiber swipe keeps them looking fresh, but that's an extra maintenance step you should factor in. Now, who should actually reach for the DM60? If you already have a decent AV receiver and want a speaker that can double as a primary left-right channel and also give you some low-end oomph without the hassle of a separate sub, these are a solid pick. They're particularly well-suited for people who enjoy cinematic content and want a more enveloping soundstage without diving into full-in Dolby Atmos installations. The ability to mix and match with other Dymension components like in-wall or in-ceiling modules means you can start small and expand later, which is attractive for DIY home theater enthusiasts. On the flip side, skip the DM60 if you're a strict audiophile chasing the most accurate, uncolored sound for critical listening. The bipolar design, while great for immersion, introduces a level of diffusion that some purists consider a compromise on pinpoint imaging. Also, if you already own a powerful subwoofer or plan to install a dedicated bass module, you might find the built-in passive radiators redundant. Finally, if you're tight on floor space or you're a renter who can't guarantee a solid wall behind the speakers, you'll likely get better results from a smaller bookshelf speaker paired with a sub. Let's talk durability and day-to-day usability. The cabinet is made from high-density MDF with a glossy veneer, and the drivers are securely mounted, so there's no rattling when you bump the speaker accidentally. The speakers weighed around 30 pounds per unit means they're stable but also not something you'd want to lift over a couch repeatedly. The power.